Greetings, government seniors. This is Mr. Smith, and we're going to be doing, at least for the next few weeks, class online. So I'm going to walk you through the notes for civil and criminal law and right to the accused. Today we're going to start with civil law. We probably won't get through it all. It'll probably be in a couple different segments, but this will help you finish your work that you have to turn in at least while we're away. Hopefully we'll get back, but let's take a walk through civil law today. Civil law is a resolution between people. When people have disagreements, they can go to court. Typically there is monetary issues involved, though the judge can go above and beyond that and award more things, but typically this is for a monetary result. There are 4 types of civil law that I'm going to walk you through now. The first type is actually quite familiar to you guys. It is what is known as contract law. Contract is a voluntary promise made between 2 parties. The most obvious for you guys, every day you go to the store, you get a receipt. A receipt is a contract law. Basically, you're paying the agreed amount for a product. And if for some reason that product's defective, then you can take that back with a receipt, so that you've shown that you're going to go back on that contract because of some, error on their part of the product, whatever it may be. There are 4 necessities to make a contract legal. All parties involved must be mentally competent. You cannot have somebody trying to shyster another person because of their mental disabilities. That is illegal, trying to pull one over. That's why fraud is also illegal. In most cases, must be a legal age. Obviously, if you go to the store and you get a receipt, that's not one of them, but most contracts on a grander scale have to be done between 2 consenting adults. So they have to be of legal age. And then obviously, you can't involve in anything illegal. So drug deals, there's no receipt in drug deals. That's why you can't run to the police. There are plenty of stories out there where, guys will run to the police when their drugs have been taken, in which case the police then arrest them as well. A contract offer also has to include 3 things: an offer. So in your case of your receipt, they're offering you a product, an acceptance that you're paying, and a consideration that is your agreed upon. It might be a signature, it might be just a handshake agreement, whatever it may be. Obviously the handshake agreements are a little bit tougher because there's no physical evidence of that, but all of those need to be there to make a contract legal, and then you can have a service for whatever amount you've decided to pay. If one of those 2 parties fails in that, then the contract's broken, obviously, and you can try to recoup what you have lost. So if you paid for something and the service was bad, then you can try to get some of your money back, and that would be done in a civil lawsuit. The second kind is property law. Probably at least once in your life, you're going to be involved in property law. That's when you buy a home. Property law is anything that you own. There are 2 types of property. The one you're more familiar with is your personal property. That's movable items such as clothes, jewelry, stocks and bonds, etc. The question for teenagers: do you legally own your stuff? And the answer is yes, but if you're still living with mom and dad, then technically they could allow the police or someone else to search that area because they own the home, but the stuff in it is yours. And so you have the right to that. Real property, like I said, all of you eventually, hopefully, are going to buy a house, unless you want to live in your parents' basement for the rest of your life. And real property is the land and whatever is attached to it. So when you go to buy a home, the previous homeowner cannot remove things. A stove is required. Refrigerator is not, by the way. Neither is washer or dryer, but there are things that are required. They cannot remove things. If you're a farmer, you can't remove the crops. That's illegal unless it's agreed upon that something is kept or taken. housing discrimination, as you see there, is often involved in real property, and then again, that can be lead to a lawsuit if you're discriminating against people for gender reasons or for race or age or any other reason. The third type of civil law cases is family law. Now, this is one of the few types of law that typically is not privy to public court cases. You cannot go and sit in civil law in family cases. Family law is its own separate. So if you go to Norristown, unlike the other courtrooms where they could have any types of civil law, family law is on its own. Typically, this deals with family relationships. Obviously, the biggest one being divorce. It could also involve child custody issues. Children can also divorce their parents. That typically happens with children that have a lot of money, like child actors. The biggest case was Gary Coleman. He was an actor back in the 70s and early 80s whose parents decided to be his agents, and basically they stole all his money. So he actually asked the courts to be divorced from his parents because they stole everything from him. And that does happen sometimes. It's a sad situation, and he ended up losing millions of dollars to his parents. So, he became separated from them. Typically, the court does not allow this too much, but it does happen on the occasion, and these are happening in civil cases. Obviously, the law is changing, though, very rapidly because of what the definition of the family is. Obviously, in 1989, when The Simpsons came out, a lot of people gave it a hard time, but now more than 5 years later, The Simpsons were actually the only nuclear family left on television. Everything else was divorced, single parents, my two dads, etc. And so the definition of family had changed, and so the law had to change with it on how they dealt with these different situations. Obviously, for a long time, many states didn't recognize gay marriage, so if you moved to a state that didn't recognize gay marriage and wouldn't get divorced, the state couldn't divorce you because they didn't recognize that you were married. So there were all kinds of legal issues. Most of those have been straightened out in the last 5 or 6 years, but there's always the occasion where something new and unusual comes up, and so the family court has to deal with all of those. And then the last one is your tort, or your civil wrong. In this case, a tort is an issue where somebody has been hurt. This is one that's going to happen probably the most frequent with you. In this case, the injured party has the right to sue because of pain and suffering, as well as injury and or loss of something. In this case, car accident. Now, usually you don't get too involved. The car insurance companies take care of that, and they hash it out between them. But sometimes you can, especially if you've gotten hurt. You can sue someone. Workers' compensation goes under here. Being hurt at work, being hurt due to somebody else's fault, property damage. All those things fall under tort or civil wrongs. An intentional tort means the offending party meant to cause the harm. Negligence, which is more likely what happened, is a tort that's they've done something with careless behavior or car accident. And so what the court has to decide here, or the jury, is, would a reasonable person have done this or not done this? And so then who lies at fault? Now, for a civil jury, which we'll talk about on the next segment, civil juries are not like criminal jury. They do not have to all agree to who's at fault. It's a simple majority will win the case, and the level of evidence is, well, we think this person made a better argument than this person. So there's not really the strict guidelines that there are to criminal law as there are to civil law, at least as far as the jury is concerned. They just decide who is the most negligent in the case, and that's how they reward damages. Sometimes both parties can win. Outside of the courts, some of the other things that can happen in civil is the one's called an injunction. An injunction is the plaintiff, and that's the person bringing the lawsuit, is going to ask the court to force the defendant, who is being called into court, to do or do not something. So a big one you'll see around the areas is quarries. A lot of people do not want quarries in their area. They're unsafe. They're not great for the environment. They create a lot of dust. There's a lot of issues, with quarries. So people will, put an injunction to not allow a quarry to be built in their area unless they go through all these different hoops and hurdles, and in that case, then they may allow it. But to stop them temporarily just from doing it before, as the lawsuit's going on, and usually they will ask the court for an injunction. And again, this would be to ask the company to not start the quarry until it's done. So, you can force, like I said, or prevent somebody from doing something with that injunction. Now, the very first thing you should do, and this is where we're going to leave off today, the very first thing you should do in a civil case, if you feel like you have been wronged, is to hire a capable lawyer. You see them on TV all the time. Those are all civil law attorneys, where they're, if you don't win, you don't pay. That is actually working on contingency, as you see here. Contingency means they get a percentage of your winnings. By the way, it ends up being a lot more than what it sounds. It is a very equitable type of law. That's why you see so many commercials for it. These are typically when people get hurt or when something has gone wrong, and that's how this lawyer will work. Most people can't afford to just keep an attorney around whenever they need them. So typically a lot of people will work on contingency, but it does get very costly for somebody that is obtaining an attorney that way, because again, they could lose, and they don't want to lose that time and money. So they're going to take quite a bit of your settlement if you get one. Also, it's always a little leery to work with a lawyer working on contingency, because they're out to make the most money they can, and that doesn't always mean doing what's in your best interest. So you got to keep that in mind when hiring an attorney that's working on contingency. But that is something that you should take a lot of time to do, to find a good attorney if you're going to file a civil lawsuit. So in our next segment, we are going to go through the steps of a civil trial and understand how that's different from a criminal trial. Till then, enjoy your day, and I will see you in the next segment.